Welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of SLMA Radio. As part of our ongoing rotating series of shows, this week we're proud to bring you Data Dump Radio, segment sponsored by LeadGenius, with our host, Mark Godley. Show where you can hear top B2B data vendors and buyers discuss the reality of today's landscape. So without further ado, let's start dumping some data with our good friend Mark Godley. Hey, Mark.
For another edition of the Data Dump Show, this is Mark Godley, and I'm completely excited to have a very good friend and a guy that I think the world of, Brett McBee-Wise, with us, who is very seasoned product visionary and leader, joining us today.
Thanks
Brett,
for having me.
You're welcome. This is also a little bit different in that Brett is actually an employee with me at LeadGenius. This isn't going to be a parochial discussion, but as I was thinking about the topic of what it's like to build and manage a product in the data business, I was going through my Rolodex as to who should we be talking with. And I couldn't ignore the fact that the best guy in Silicon Valley just happens to be on our payroll. And that's why you're here, Brett. But our relationship goes back far, far, far beyond earlier than us working together. So for those listening, why don't you give folks a little bit of your background in martech?
I've spent my entire career designing, marketing, building, sales, and marketing software. I've actually not worked in a different space other than martech and sales tech. I worked at two marketing automation companies, one really early one called Genius.com, and then I was an early employee at Marketo. Then later on, I moved on to building, sales engagement tools and marketing attribution products.
We know what Marketo does. I'm imagining everyone listening knows that. What did Genius do?
So Genius.com was actually, it predated marketing automation, and they were actually one of the first companies to do sales engagement. They had something called the Genius Tracker that was a lot like ToutApp and Yesware, in that you could send, sales reps could send emails with trackable links in them, and then you could sort of track a prospect's engagement on your website in real time so that you could tailor the conversation.
Got it. And then before you came to LeadGenius, you were with a company that was focused on attribution. Is that a fair? So explain to people what that means.
Yeah, so I helped build a company called BrightFunnel, and we were focused on analyzing operational sales and marketing data that lives in people's CRMs to understand how to connect $1 of spend in marketing to $1 of revenue that comes in the door. So what was the effect that the campaigns that you were running had on your business, and doing things like calculating ROI.
It's probably a scary thing to actually look at.
Messy. It's a messy thing.
How did you end up with a career in martech, in product? You go from playing college hockey to, is that the next step if you don't get in the NHL?
Yeah. It's interesting. It definitely evolved over time. I went to school for marketing and art and design specifically. And it kind of slowly evolved to where, I had started in marketing and I started working with product teams at various organizations kind of on the side, helping them out. I'm also a self-taught engineer by trade. And as time went on, I was not only sort of creating, designs and creating visions for products, I was evangelizing those product visions and also running engineering teams along.
So what do you mean you're a self-taught engineer?
Yeah, so when I got out of school, no one knew the difference between, for example, like web design and web development. So they thought if you knew how to design a website, you should know how to build one. And I realized I was not going to get a job. So
design is what you knew at that time.
Yeah. And I've never taken a single class. And then I ended up kind of teaching myself development. And it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. And kind of slowly over time, I shifted from the marketing end of things at companies and sort of being involved in design and development to the product side.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about your skill set is it really is the nexus, the intersection of you understand the customer experience marketing. You focused really well and have a lot of well, your formal roles have been about the product as a customer uses it, but you can actually read lines of code. And so you understand technically how something's put together. And to bring those things together is quite a unique, it's a bit of a purple squirrel. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
You've worked in martech, building applications, SaaS companies. Tell me about the role data has played in those companies or for those clients, because before we worked together, a lot of our discussions were around data, even though none of those companies were data companies.
At least every company that I've been a part of up to this point, every good application has built on the back of some form of data. In the past, at Marketo, it was large swaths of email data and contact information. Later on, it was a kind of a fire hose of social engagement and social contacts, building kind of sales engagement tools. And then lastly, it was this, a large amount of operational data that's organized in somebody's CRM. So always been involved in go-to-market data in some capacity. And so this was kind of an interesting next step.
Yeah, one of the things that I wonder about is, Marketo in particular, or just marketing automation in general, like they are dependent on accurate, good data so that you can have deliverability and that you can have proper targeting. But none of those businesses that I don't know any of the marketing automation companies that have endeavored to take that task on to help their customers.
So that's one of the things that we noticed at BrightFunnel. That's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to get into this area of data. If you look at solving attribution, if you look at the way that somebody measures their effectiveness for a go-to-market team and the campaigns that they're running, so much of it depends on having good data to begin with. And it was something that we had no control over and that we couldn't help people with. A lot of those companies, and certainly when I was designing and building that product, that was one of the things that we talked about, was wanting to be able to enable people in sort of making better decisions about the campaigns that they were running, as well as the data that they were using. And we couldn't do that because we weren't a data company.
Well, it's funny you mentioned a data company. It almost feels to me like every company needs to be a data company today.
We were an operational data company, right? So we were sitting on operational data. I was looking at companies like Everstring, Radius, and had all this predictive stuff going on. I sort of was seeing all of these companies who had access to large amounts of operational data, but then they desired to have access to this market data that they didn't have. And if you really had both of those things, then you could really, it's the holy grail.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the predictive space, because the predictive space, which is a shell of its former self, all of those companies, Lattice Engines, Mintigo, Infer, whole bunch of others, those that are still standing have morphed into data companies.
That's right. Yeah.
Like the algorithm is the commodity.
Right.
It's the data and interpreting the data, which is where customers have found value.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, before we dive more into data in the second half of the program, talk a little bit about the buyers of the products you've built have been marketing leaders. So talk about where you see marketers making mistakes in either buying or using their applications.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think this notion of, sort of the rise of data-driven marketing kind of all started around the time that marketing automation started taking off, right? When marketers were spending sort of gobs of money and acquiring technologies to do their job. And I think over time, what I've noticed as it probably goes hand in hand with having technology fatigue and sort of buying too many things to put in your marketing tech stack, but people are sort of relying too heavily on one tool to solve their problems. They've sort of taken the creativity out of the job, if you will. And so, I think what you're sort of seeing is this renaissance of a good old-fashioned handwritten note and old-fashioned thoughtful marketing tactics go a long way.
Snail mail is back.
This digital world. Yeah, no, it kind of is, right? I mean, if you look at the way that people are, some of the best ABM campaigns now are just very highly personalized, manually created notes and reach outs, which I think people appreciate.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break to pay some bills and hear from some sponsors. And on the backside of that, I want to delve into specifically your LeadGenius experience. I don't want to get too parochial, but I do want to talk about leading product at not a application company that happens to have data, but a data company. Sound good?
Sounds good.
We just want to remind you that this show is brought to you today by LeadGenius. And for those of you who want to learn more about what LeadGenius does, it all has to do with total addressable market. That's right. What is your total addressable market? Do you even know? Who are all the decision makers in your ideal accounts? LeadGenius can tell you all that and more. Helps bring business-to-business enterprise companies such as yours information they couldn't get otherwise. People like Google, eBay, and Square. LeadGenius has the highest quality contact and account data available anywhere. How? Well, it's simple. They verify every single data point with a unique combination of real human researchers and machine learning. Real people plus machines. That gives you quality that is assured and accuracy that is 100% guaranteed. Really. See for yourself why enterprise marketing and sales leaders trust LeadGenius. Visit LeadGenius.com to learn more about your total addressable market today and see if you can't help them figure out all those questions rolling around in your head. LeadGenius.com. All right, all of which leads me back to the second half of this show.
Welcome back to the Data Dump podcast. This is Mark Godley, and I'm here with a good friend, Brett McBee-Wise, who is Vice President of Product at LeadGenius. And also, if you heard the first half of the program, has a long background with brands in the martech space. So let's talk about your experience at LeadGenius. You're the first data company you've worked for, I believe. Tell us what brought you here.
So I had spent years around products, revolving squarely around go-to-market data. And I noticed sort of on the back half of my career here that the traditional sort of martech, sales tech space and the data space are merging. Or it seemed like converging. To me that they were converging, right? Like you had like software, like proper martech and software sales tech companies wishing that they were data companies and trying to get their hands on this market data, and the vice versa. So I think for me it was a natural kind of
progression. Yeah. Okay. How do you define product at a data company? This is something that I think you and I have vigorously debated before. So I'm going to give you the floor here and I'm going to shut up.
Yeah. So I don't think it's just product at a data company, but product at any company is how you deliver the entire customer experience through a combination of software and or data. Right. So I think here we're in a unique position where we have one foot in both realms. And for us, one of the pieces of value that we provide is obviously the data to people, but it's really the entire experience that we should be providing to people, which is how they request that data, how they analyze that data, and how they operationalize that data. And they understand that by interacting with software.
So that software interaction, you talking about connecting to systems of record, whether that be Salesforce or Marketo. It sounds like you're also talking about dashboarding or some kind of analytics.
Yeah. If I take one step back, I built an attribution company. So our product was in large part the attribution data that we sold, but that wasn't why people bought us. It was almost too hard to understand on its own, right? And they couldn't really use it effectively by just handing them attribution data. What they were paying for was this platform that helped them understand and sort of guided them on sort of understanding what the attribution calculations meant and enabled them to make better decisions. So I think here we've got our own version of that, which is understanding what type of data we've delivered to you, how that data is affecting your business, how you can operationalize that data.
And the impact of that data, right? Like what has it done downstream? How has it performed as compared to other data sources or other marketing spend? So what you're kind of saying is, you work for a company whose entire business was attribution, but really attribution needs to be a feature of any company in the go-to-market strategy of a marketer today. Is that fair to say?
Proving value needs to be a feature of any company today. I think I just happen to be at the company whose sole mission was proving value on steroids.
Got it. So, okay, a little bit more complicated question. I'm going to throw out two other aspects, and you tell me if they're part of product. Another aspect is, at least at a data company, the systems by which, the methods by which the data company acquires its data. And in our case, because we have an enormous community model, think about that for those who don't know our business, a private Upwork community that are data wranglers, the tools that they use. So it's the tools the company used to create the data lake. And then they're the tools, in our case, researchers use to extract the subsets of the data lake that our customers want to pay for. Do you define those as part of product or even with a small p, or is that something else I've described?
No, it's absolutely.
But the customer never sees that.
Doesn't matter. Right?
Doesn't matter.
It enables you to deliver a product, to deliver an experience. So without those things, you couldn't deliver a product. So they're part of your product. The equivalent would be I run a product that only connects to a database, and there's some amount of calculations that have to be done, right, in the back end to deliver a product. To deliver the information that somebody consumes through an application, it's no different. We have systems, albeit they're way more complex than what I'm talking about, but we have these systems and processes in place that are required for us to produce data that our customers' platform, so it's part of the product.
And when you're making decisions, how to allocate roadmap, which eventually means how engineers get assigned. Is there some formula you use? I want 30% of my effort going against market-facing stuff. I want 10% focused on data, or is that fluid and you're changing the allocation once a quarter, once a year, or something like that?
Well, you can't have one without the other. So I'm never neglecting one leg product, right, completely. But I think directionally, I'm always sort of choosing where we're weakest. So I'm sort of looking at where we're weakest to focus. And it's always this intersection of where we're weakest, where we're going to have the biggest impact, and that align obviously with customer and internal goals here. And then I think you're obviously making like micro-directional changes as time progresses, right? As you always have to be making meaningful progress in any leg of product, right?
Okay. So another uniqueness is about LeadGenius. So LeadGenius is the first data company you've worked for. Is it also fair to say that LeadGenius is the first service-enabled technology company or technology-enabled service company? I don't know which how you think about us. Are we also the first fusion of not just data and software, but service and software that you've worked for?
Well, certainly that I've worked for. I always refer to it as a service enabled by software. That's kind of how I refer to it, at least to myself.
Okay.
And I think that we're the first in the data space to do that. We're sort of at this weird intersection between sales and marketing tech and the data space. And I think we're certainly the first ones within that sort of areas to take on this challenge. I don't think we're the first by any means. I mean, you could look at a company like Upwork and their service that's enabled by software.
Right. But I guess my point is, this is the first time you've managed product
Definitely.
At a company that has this hybrid solution of it's not just give us a credit card, give us a credential, and away you go. I mean, there is an enormous project management and human element of how our clients interact with us as a company. And there's enormous product.
It's definitely more complicated. Yes.
One more question before we get into you predicting the future, which is, which do you think is more important at a data company? Having great data in an average customer experience, or having an awesome customer experience in average data? Now, I know you're going to say it's both, but I'm going to get off the freaking fence. Which is it?
This has nothing to do with being a data company or not. I think good user experience will always trump in the end. I think
good user experience will trump
in the end. I've seen the best products technologically have the worst user experience and they lose.
I think you're right. I think I agree with you. You know, the data space is notorious for people that claim they have great data, but because the experience is so poor, they never gain traction, and they scoff at buyers that aren't as smart as they are. For some other companies that create an amazing experience, and the customer, back to your attribution point, they don't even know the data is average because they don't even have the systems in place to gauge it. But the experience is so frictionless, they love it.
Or they're willing to overlook something,
yes,
right? Because they can better utilize it.
Excellent. Okay. So given that you're a big brain, a big thinker, and have had this great trajectory, this great arc, make some predictions in the next 30 seconds. Tell us about sales tech and martech. Where is it in 3 years?
So I think martech had its boom. I think sales tech is having its boom.
Interesting.
I don't think martech boom is over, but I think, the rise of like AI,
we're off the height of disillusionment.
Yeah, exactly. We're off the height of disillusionment at this point. We sort of took all of the things that were true in martech 10 years ago with regards to marketing automation. All of those same tactics are being deployed in sales right now.
Got it.
So that's what's going on. It's like shifted. And now there's a big
to the BDR, right?
Yeah, there's a big shift to automation in sales and software-driven sales motions and AI-powered sales motions. I think that as both of these spaces kind of mature and they sort of chase their ambitions to sort of own your entire sales and marketing process, I think that they're going to need to get their hands on marketing data, which is they'll want to become more and more.
So you just mentioned a buzzword, and I'll throw out a rhetorical question. Is AI either?
Is AI either what?
Is AI either artificial or intelligent?
I think that
it's neither. I'm going to answer for you.
Okay. It's neither.
If anyone wants to hear a longer version, hit me up offline. I'll explain to you what I mean. Last 30 seconds. Predictions on the data space in the next 3 years.
I think it'll continue to consolidate, which is already happening. I think people have been chasing big data for over 10 years now, and if they're going to continue to chase it, I think there's going to be a couple of holdouts and niche data sets, which I think people are starting to appreciate, right?
Yeah.
Because as sales and marketing data needs to become more sophisticated to kind of fuel these data-driven campaigns of the future, I think these niche data sets and data vendors are going to become increasingly more important. And I think they're going to have to focus on better software-driven client user experiences to differentiate themselves.
Couldn't agree more. I sleep well at night knowing you're on our payroll. If folks want to get in touch with you, other than people who want to recruit you, what's the best way for people to reach out?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I don't bite.
So. Excellent. Well, Brett, good having you on the program. Get back to work.
You've been listening to another episode of Data Dump Radio, right here on SLMA Radio, a show featured on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you.